Well, good morning, everybody. It is an honor to be here today. I see some friends in the room, too many to name, but I see you and I appreciate you being in the space. My name is Ron Harris. I serve as the Chief Resilience Officer for the city of Minneapolis. I'm also deeply involved in local, state, and national politics. And so I'm honored to moderate this panel of really awesome guests. So as we get started, what I'll do is I will just allow the panelists to introduce themselves, quick 1 minute, who you are, what you do, and then we'll dive into the discussion. And I will start with Representative Feist, since she is my state representative.
I didn't know that. Cool. Where do you live?
New Brighton.
Oh, awesome. Me too. Hi, everybody. Sandra Feist. I am the representative for 41B, and I guess people aren't all here in the Twin Cities. So anyway, like North Metro area. I am an immigration attorney when I'm not a legislator. And I have a whole bunch of notes about my experiences on ranked choice voting, but I won't go there. So I guess, yeah, I don't know, I could talk a lot about myself, but I'll just leave it at that for now. I'm really excited to be here. I really enjoyed the process of being a candidate in a ranked choice vote setting. And for us, it happened by surprise because of the pandemic, but it turned out to play to my strengths. I'd like to think I would have won anyway, but I think that it uniquely played to my strengths. So I'm excited to kind of share that experience. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Next, we'll go to Councilmember Bencomo.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Yes, all the way from Las Cruces, New Mexico, probably a little warmer than you all are right now. Yes, my name is Johana Bencomo. I am a Las Cruces City Councilor for District 4. I was elected in 2019 with our first ranked choice voting election here in Las Cruces. First and foremost, I'm an immigrant. I'm originally from Chihuahua, Mexico, and I am an immigrant rights organizer. I absolutely ran my campaign like a community organizer, and I think that's really what set me apart from the other two candidates. I also loved very much running a ranked choice voting campaign, and I almost won in the first round, and I was very proud of that. So, but yes, I'm very excited to be here and to share with you all that experience.
Thank you so much. And we'll shift over to Mr. Sean Dugar.
All right. Good. I think it's still morning for you all. It's definitely morning for me. So I'm Sean Dugar. I have been leading in the Bay Area ranked choice candidate campaigns for the last decade, as well as conducting ranked choice voting education, both here in the Bay Area and, as Jean said, in New York City. And so I'm excited to join you all and just share some of the experiences from various types of candidates' point of view, as well as that of a consultant who's worked at pretty much every level of the political process.
Excellent. So grateful to have you here. As all of you know, this has been a pretty intense 18 months for the planet and certainly for our country, and to a large extent for our democracy. Here in the Twin Cities, we are grappling with yet another police-involved shooting of an unarmed Black man, Dante Wright. And it wouldn't be right to dive into this panel without recognizing the context that we're all in, that the level of responsibility that we all have as civic leaders, as elected leaders, as folks who work on campaigns or even interested in civic society to make things better. Throughout our country's history, we've confronted these moments of crisis with a level of resilience and a level of openness to reinvention, right? Which has enabled our nation to become a better version of itself. And all of you have a role in doing so. Our media and our information environment has become toxic and disruptive. Our institutions and elements of our political parties have become outdated. And we've seen, unseen levels of economic, political, and social inequity. And the hyper-partisanship of our leaders has rendered our democracy to a halt. And so what we'll do today is we'll dive into ranked choice voting. We'll talk about, some of the benefits, and we'll talk about some of your experiences. Would love to hear about how you've built coalitions to win your elections, for example, or how the emergence of ranked choice voting in your election changed the nature of the race, or the dynamics itself. So I'm gonna shift over to Sean, and I'll ask you, sir, what are your biggest takeaways from the ranked choice voting elections that you've been in compared to traditional elections, if you had been involved in those before?
So I think I always tell candidates at its core, ranked choice voting is about values and being able to really dive in with voters on values and connect and touch their hearts, as opposed to kind of the flash and lack of substance of traditional elections. So being able to really connect with voters on that level um, first endears you to voters so they are more energized around you, but also really allows for you to then go from values into issues. And often when you go just straight into issues, it kind of goes over people's heads or goes in and out of their ears. You know, I challenge you to think of a presidential campaign where where they won and it was based on their positions on issues. Generally, presidential campaigns are about values, and ranked choice voting, fortunately, fits into that realm. So I think that's key. The other thing is just building that diverse coalition. And I think, again, when you're able to talk to people from a position of values, they're more open and receptive to deeper conversations and building those bridges than when you approach them with, here's my platform, and you either fit into it or you don't. Um, yeah, I think those are kind of the key things: building bridges, building coalitions, and talking from values.
I love that perspective on values. No one's ever knocked on my door and convinced me to vote for them based on a deep policy analysis or whatever the case is as it relates to their platform. It's always been heart over head. Sandra, what do you say about that? What are some of your biggest takeaways from ranked choice voting election versus elections without ranked choice voting?
Yeah, I would say that I kind of had a classic second choice strategy because I was coming in, I was very active in politics at the federal level. I've been doing immigration advocacy forever. But I was not a known figure at the local level. And so I jumped in right away, but there were already 5 other people because there was an open seat and a lot of people jumped in right away. And I showed up at a fundraiser and knew nobody. And they had everybody go up. I wasn't expecting to speak, but they had everybody jump on a stage. And I was like, hello, none of you know me at all. And I want to represent you. And so I wrote some notes to myself about kind of what my takeaways were. And the first thing I wrote is just be real. And I think this definitely goes to what Sean was saying. I met with the Senate district chair, and the main thing we talked about was toys, because it turns out he's a toy collector. I'm a toy collector. So we mostly talked about Star Wars. And so I was real. And I also, I have a lot of random thoughts, but like, I was just like, I showed up and I was helpful and I was connecting with people just like on a very real personal level. There's an elder woman who's very active in our Senate district, and she had been trying very hard to like get some action alerts out to the Senate district in a more systematic way. And so I met with her at a coffee shop, and we didn't talk about me. We didn't talk about policy. We talked about like websites and activating people. And we talked about her son who had done the same thing in Seattle and how we could replicate that here in the Twin Cities. So I just really, showed up in a real way, tried to be legitimately helpful, tried to contribute on a very condensed timeline. So the next thing I wrote was use time wisely, show up as much as possible, and just really like demonstrate like your character. So I think that definitely I'm saying the same thing Sean is, that you need to like just show who you are as a human being. And for me, that was really important because nobody knew me and there were 6 of us. And so I guess at some point I can tell like the horse race story of our ranked choice voting, because it was pretty interesting mathematically. But I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Awesome. Thank you. Johana, how what were some of your biggest takeaways in your election? And if you had run an election before ranked choice voting, how were they different?
Thank you. Yeah, definitely echo both the representative and Sean's comments. So as a community organizer who'd been used to running nonpartisan civic engagement campaigns already, we already do the work of, often we're talking to the people that campaigns exclude, right? We're talking to the folks that are marginalized and excluded and not invited into democracy. And so for me, then as a candidate, ranked choice voting was really easy for me to get excited about it. It was really easy for me. It wasn't like a huge shift. It was just exciting to talk to people. We, as a community organizer, we always talk to people about going to the ballot box and voting your values, right? And so I think values is the stream here, but we always talk to folks about, it's not about a candidate, it's not about an issue, it's about your values. And so I feel like ranked choice voting for me was not a hard thing to own, to like really be excited about, and then to show that excitement at the doors. And so for me, it was definitely about, look, this is why I think I'm the best candidate. I'm never going to tell you I'm an emerge trained person. I'm never going to tell you to go to a door and not say, this is why I think you should vote for me. However, when you go to that door and someone's like, I really like this other person, I think it shows a lot when you say, you know what, that's okay, I like that person too, please make me your number two, and here's why, right? And I think it shows a lot when you show up to the door, not bashing another person, not saying, I don't think that's the right choice, I really think it should be me. It's really about inviting someone into saying, you actually get to have a choice, you get to vote your values, and then you have another choice, and then maybe another choice. And I don't know, it was exciting. I was in a race of three folks. One other candidate we were very similar in our platforms. At the end of the day, I decided to really use my skills as an organizer, my commitment to social justice, to be the thing that really I felt like was set me apart. But I never spoke badly about any of the two candidates. And I think, honestly, in any other race that I've seen, that happens so quickly. Honestly, like when a race is competitive, folks get defensive, and folks get for lack of a better word, kind of gross. And that's what turns particularly young people away from campaigns. And I think ranked choice voting really allowed for a lot of people who, are always sometimes kind of discouraged with the voting process to say, oh, you know what, this is good. And it was predominantly young people in the exit polls here who said, this was cool. I wish ranked choice voting was something we could use on every election. And I really made sure to be that excited during the campaign as well.
These are some really powerful reflections. Everyone mentioned values, everyone mentioned, in one way or another, heart over head, right? Really connecting with people based on their lived experiences, and also expanding access, right? We heard that there are more people actually involved when they're not turned off due to the hyperpartisanship or the negativity. What I share with people all the time, one of the reasons why I like ranked choice voting is because it makes it more natural to focus on the vision and less about the visionary, right? Oftentimes in our politics, we get this mentality where we identify somebody who we fall in love with, and if they don't line up to if other candidates don't line up to their personalities or what have you, we focus so much on the personality and so much less on the values. I'm going to come back to you, council member, and ask this question. You talked about you brought the word coalition. Would love to hear about how you approached your campaign and to build a coalition in a race where there were folks who had similar platforms, and you knew that you had to get not only the first choice vote, but position yourself for second and third. So can you share some more insights about how you put your coalition together?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I hope there's more community organizers on this call. I always say more community organizers should be running for office. I know that for a long time that was taboo and we didn't want to talk about that, but do it, and then run your campaign like a community organizer. Don't let anybody tell you not to. So for me, again, it just was easy to build a broad coalition, right? To really talk to folks about, this is why I want to run. I love this city, and I want you to join me, and let's do something together. And even through the endorsement process, right? There's actually the Sierra Club endorsed both the candidate that was very similar to me and myself at the same time. And I very much used that in social media. And I, again, lifted up the great thing about ranked choice voting is that you don't really have to choose between one or the other person. You can actually choose two people who have very similar values. And at the end of the day, it's not about me winning, it's about who's going to make our city better. And I feel like that was really the approach that I decided to take, again with the caveat that I was still saying, and I still think I'm the better person, right? I still think that I have such X thing for me to be able to win. And you know, the third candidate, who was the least very much to the right of both of us, there was very little negativity. There was very little animosity. I think we were in spaces often together, and it just felt like one of the nicest campaigns I'd ever been a part of, honestly. And so, but again, for me, it just made sense to build as much partnership and collaboration with the folks who were endorsing in our race, and you know, again, try to set yourself apart for sure, but not in a way that's disparaging to folks who might have a similar platform than you.
Thank you. That's excellent. Representative, we'll shift to you. You talked about a very crowded race, and you had to get a little mathematical, if that's even a word, to get elected. We'd love to hear about how you built your coalition.
Yeah, so it was definitely about math. So I brought in a very healthy number of people into the process, and that like stems just from being like a person in the world who's out there, who's already just living my life in a way that makes people want to support me. Like, I don't mean that in a weird vain way, but like like in Cub Scouts, I was in charge of the Pinewood Derby because I love the Pinewood Derby. So like I was showing like I can show up, I can get stuff done, I can be organized, I can be enthusiastic, I can make weird little cars. But like a ton of Cub Scouts families, you know, showed up. A lot of my kids' friends, like just people in the community who I was close with, and showed that I was a person of character. So that was like my base that I started with. Then there was like, and all 6 of us had like the exact same platform. So we were not different. And we are still friends. Like, to echo Johana, like the positivity was like a remarkable aspect of this endorsement race. And so I identified one other person of the 6 who was also an immigration attorney, very similar to me in a lot of ways. And I was like, I can get all of her second choice. And I did. And also I don't mean this in any negative way, but like, this is like the horse race part of my, like, I really respect and liked all of the people I ran against, and we're still friends. But anyway, like that person was clearly going to be the person who was going to get the lowest number of votes. And so I got all of her second, and that probably got me to about 40%. And then there were 2 candidates who I wasn't sure which one of them was going to be my main competition, but I was sure I was going to get second choice for those 2. Like, there were aspects of me that made me those people's preference for second choice. And so I worked very, very hard to become that second choice, to get those confirmations. And I think that one thing that was very interesting in the end is one of those candidates who came in third, and so the second choices were very important for her. At the last minute, they came up with a strategy of having everyone list her and no endorsement. And if everybody had actually followed through, I would have lost. Like, there were like 240 delegates, and I won by like 5 in the end. And I made enough of an impression and enough of a connection with that candidate's support base that many of her people refused to list no endorsement and listed me as second choice. And that was a result of like making a very real, meaningful connection with those supporters of one of my opponents. So I feel like I had one more really big picture thing to say, but I can't think of it. But yeah, it was very mathematical. It was very strategic. I was always doing math, and I was always trying to figure out kind of where my votes were going to come from. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. So we had 6 ballots, and I was like pretty close to one of the other candidates, but basically every single ballot I picked up votes. And then at the very last ballot, I I won by 5 votes out of a lot. So it was like very dramatic and very, very close. And I'm like still legit friends with the top 3 of us, especially. But yeah, it was like, it is very math based, even though it's also very values based, and you're being very real, but you're also being very strategic about who you're targeting to become second choice. So I think I'll leave it at that for now.
I think it's really great strategy. I'm gonna dig a little deeper on tactics. So when you said you made connection with these top candidates to get their second choice, what does that look like? What does the effort to make those connections to get those second choice votes look like?
Yeah. Are you asking me still?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of different things. So the first thing I thought of is that there was a couple who were strong supporters of one of my opponents, and the wife was also a romance novelist, and I write romance novels. And so at the time, I wrote this book. I'm trying to get an agent, but then I got distracted by being a politician, and my husband needs to do more edits. But anyway, she's like a published author. And so she was giving me really helpful tips, and I was sharing with her my query letter, and we were connecting on this level of like, we are both romance novelists. And out of that, I got 2 delegates. And remember, I won by 5. So that was a husband and wife. There was another guy who was a strong supporter of my opponent, who was new to the process. And my husband had been like a precinct chair. And so when I was talking with him, I was like, if you want, my husband could talk with you too about his experience and what to expect. And so my husband connected with him, and they talked, and so we built that connection. And also he loves zombies and I love zombies. And so we talked about zombie stuff and, zombie movies. So, and like, there's this one person who was a supporter who was like actually really obsessed with ranked choice voting, and like the math of it. Like, he is a very sophisticated person on ranked choice voting, but like, he lives really close to me. Like, I posted a picture from a park, and we were connecting on social media, and he's like, I recognize that tree because I planted it when I was a kid from a styrofoam cup. And so I know exactly where you are. I live like on that park. And so we went for a walk. Like, we go on walks like pretty regularly now. But like, just like really just like deep, real conversations about like our lives and politics. And so it was like I said, time management is really important, because you're trying to like I am obsessed with time management, but like, you're trying to like slot in like time to make a real connection. So like, that time might be an hour, and it's like, I will spend this hour going for a long meandering walk, and that is the best use of my time. And so it was like real connections. I'm trying to think of anybody else who was, oh yeah, here's another example. So one of the other candidates was like really, really strong on environmentalism and climate change advocacy. Like, that was like her actual day job. And so there was a boyfriend and girlfriend who were strong supporters of her. They said, we're single issue voters. She's the climate change one. And I was door knocking, and I stopped by their house, and they had like an amazing bookshelf. And we ended up talking for a really long time just about books and writing. And they were both grad students. We talked about grad school. And so they were like, oh yeah, you're for sure our number 2. And so again, that's 2 people, and I won by 5. And like, we like still stay in touch. Like, I have a sticky note from her because I need to call her back. She's worried that the MPCA is going to lose their ability to regulate fuel emissions. And that's not going to happen. But yeah, so I guess my point is like, they're real, like meaningful, deep friendships that I created, but like on a timeline, on a condensed scale, which is like, we should like look at it as like an amazing opportunity. Like, I'm 44 now. Like, when you get to a certain age, like, you don't get to meet so many new people and make so many new friends like all of a sudden. And I legitimately think like, over like a course of 3 months last year, I made like 50 new people that I consider like an actual friend that like I could call if I needed help with something, if I was like stranded because my car broke down. So I think like, you just have to be like focusing on making like actual meaningful connections, because like half these people voted no endorsement. And they were the people who I couldn't get. I know my spreadsheet, like literally I know everybody who voted for everybody. And the people who voted no endorsement were the people who never picked up their phone, never responded to my handwritten letters, never responded to my emails. But the people who I connected with for real, like they didn't vote no endorsement. They voted for me as their second choice. And that was how I won.
I think it's amazing. If it weren't a ranked choice voting election, there may not have been those opportunities to make those real connections, right? And those connections outside of politics, which last beyond your race and beyond the endorsement itself. So I appreciate you sharing those reflections. All right, Sean, would love to hear your reflections about this coalition. And I think that you have a video you want to show us.
Yes. So before I show the video, in 2018, I ran a campaign for a woman named Pam Harris who ran for Oakland City Council. The district she ran in is the most conservative district in Oakland. Now keep in mind it's Oakland, so that the level of conservative is something that comes into play, but it's a district where half of the residents said their number one concern was lack of police presence. The other half of the district said their number one concern was police accountability. And so how do you win in a district as an out queer Black woman who is ultra progressive, who does bookkeeping for Black Lives Matters nationally? How do you win in a district like that? It's building a coalition. And so she was able to get the endorsement of a bunch of Black Lives Matter leaders, but also get the endorsement of the Police Officers Association. Right, Neil, I see your face. And that was simply because she approached them as workers. She said, I might not agree with you on everything, but at the core, you're workers, and we should keep our promises to you when it comes to pensions. And just simply saying that was good enough for them. They knew that she was going to disagree with them on accountability measures, on a whole bunch of other stuff. But she had their backs when it came to their pensions, and that was good enough for them. But it's also teaming up and working with other candidates. I do about 8 or 9 candidate trainings a day in New York City right now. And I tell everyone that there are 2 strategies under ranked choice voting, and I'm sure you all will talk about this: the front runner strategy and the underdog strategy. And so we were able to partner with 2 other women in the campaign, and so 2 other candidates. The front runner was a wealthy, straight white man who owned his own business that he inherited from his father, and and everyone else was either a person of color or a woman. And so the 3 women came together and did this. I'm going to show you a quick video.
Hi, I'm Pam Harris.
I'm Nayeli Maxon.
I'm Shane Tao.
We're running for Oakland City Council District 4.
For the past 16 years, this seat has been held by dynamic women.
We are 3 well-qualified candidates for City Council.
We are mothers, public servants, and community leaders.
Pam has 20 years of nonprofit finance experience. She can manage any budget.
Nayeli has worked in the District 4 office. She knows the district's issues inside and out.
Shane has worked for the City Council for 5 years. She has the experience to get results.
We're asking for your support on November 6th.
This is a ranked choice election. Vote for us 1, 2, or 3.
You can learn more about us on our websites.
Vote for positive leadership,
collaborative leadership,
women's leadership.
And so by coming together, doing something just that simple, I think that video, Neil, are you crying? Okay. I think that video cost a total of like $150 to film. They were able to get a lot of press around it because it was 3 women coming together to overcome a straight, rich white guy. And it worked. Pam didn't end up winning because she was outspent 10-1 by labor. So money in politics is always an issue, no matter what. But one of the women in the video, Shane Tao, was able to come out on top and win that election. So building those coalitions amongst candidates really is the way to go, especially if you're not the front runner.
Well, one, how many people would love to vote in an election where that was the campaigning, the tone, the rhetoric, the messaging, right? That seems so much more inviting into the process than what we traditionally see with the negative ads and other things like that. Sandra, looks like you have a question.
I just wanted to say that we totally did that in my campaign as well. One of the candidate who came in number 2, she and I got co-endorsed by the Veterans Caucus, and we were like, let's make an announcement together. So we wrote a joint statement. We worked together to get our logos on it, and it was really nice. And I do think it kind of made us the front runners, like the people who people thought of as the top 2. So yeah, we did that. That's really interesting.
And I love it because you all are now talking to a much wider base of people with your messaging, and that you are letting them know that no matter who wins, we really care about you as a district and you as people. And we trust our leadership as much as we trust the other person's leadership, even though we're competing against each other. Sean, I'll come back to you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just real quick, I'll say, and even in New York City, which is known for its nasty politics, we're already seeing candidates, even for mayor, do events together, and just a general shift in the tone of political discourse and campaigning. You know, people are no longer talking about their opponents. They're talking now about their fellow candidates and their friends and their partners. And in a place like New York City, where people love the mudslinging, it's quite interesting to see that shift in almost every single campaign. I can only think of maybe 2 campaigns so far that out of 511 candidates that have gone negative. So it really is changing the dynamics and the way that candidates are campaigning.
Here's a question for the from the audience to the panel. I'll start with you, Sean, on this one. Audience member says, at this moment, we're trying to balance positivity with the need to connect with the fury and the pain of our community, which we all share. So how do we stay positive in a moment like this when who is elected, whether they're on the city council or what have you, is truly a matter of life and death? I'll add to that. Should we be staying positive in a moment like this? I'll start with you, Sean.
I think, again, you have to connect with people on values. And there is a way to do that with a positive light. The sad reality is a Black man is killed in America by cops every 36 hours. So it's not something new. Yes, there is frustration and anger, and it is well deserved. But that's going to continue to happen, unfortunately, until something major shifts and changes in this country. And so as you all are looking at an upcoming election, a very close near election, then you really do have to figure out how to channel that anger into a conversation about values, and ensuring that in that messaging, you're talking about taking courageous stands and standing up for what's right and what's just. And so there is a way to come at it from a positive light. I'll admit most of the candidates I've worked with are people of color and women. And there is that stereotype of an angry Black woman that unfortunately Black candidates in general have to avoid. And so I do tend to steer people to say, go to the positive, which is the values. You can always be positive about your values, even if the room that you're in is negative. And you can connect with people in that way.
And I would add to that, you also cut through the noise that way too, right? Being a positive light in some of those spaces. Johana, I would love to hear, your perspective on this, right? How do we both center the pain and anger and frustration and fury while also maintaining a positive campaign, certainly with differences in policy with your opponents?
Yeah, that is such a good question. I feel like as an organizer, for me, it's important to show up looking like hope often, even in the moments where I always say I'm a chillona. If you don't speak Spanish, that just means a crybaby. I cry about everything and anything. And I stopped apologizing a long time ago about crying in public, right? And so I feel like I try to show up looking like hope even when my heart is absolutely broken or I have this righteous anger burning. A couple of thoughts to this. When I ran in 2019, Las Cruces had just experienced 17,000 asylum seekers just dropped off at our bus stations, like that had, Las Cruces is a border community, like that had just happened. There was a lot of feelings on both sides about this. I'm an immigrant though, and so I think people can argue with you statistics and all these things all day long. People cannot argue your experience with you, right? Like bring your full self, bring your full experience to the center, and then while doing so, center the experiences of people, those closest to you and those closest to the pain. I very much ran a campaign on the thought that the people closest to the pain are the people closest to the solution, and we should absolutely be centering their voices and their ideas and their thoughts. For me now, as an elected official who is now very much criticizing police budgets, and very much criticizing the way that people traditionally in positions like mine in city councils, local governments have turned. Like we are here because people in positions like mine have not had bold stances or taken courageous stances. And I've often, as an elected official, talk about how politically unpopular it is to critique policing, to talk about police accountability as a local elected official. And I want to continue to push back on that. And I'm going to be really honest with you. At the end of the day, if my next election comes around and I lose because people didn't like my bold stances, I'm honestly going to be okay with that, because I want to close the curtain on the show knowing that I didn't betray my values and that I didn't betray my community. And to me, that's what is most important. And if I was able to push a conversation forward, then that's a win too, right? We want to fail forward. And so those are a little bit of my thoughts on that. I really do feel like, and again, I want to acknowledge that when you're in the middle of a campaign, you're like, but if I win, I know I can change something, right? So like, I know that sort of pull as well. All I have to say though is that center your experience and the experience of those people closest to the pain.
I love that. I get the rare chance to do some work with organizers now, and I consider myself a lifelong organizer. And there's a way that organizers approach changing the world and advocacy, right? Shifting over to another advocate, Representative Feist, I would love to hear, especially because you're at the legislature right now, and a lot of the stuff that we need as it relates to reforming policing actually gets halted at the state. So how do you both maintain a positive air about your advocacy or candidacy or campaign while also dealing with folks who fundamentally are oppositional to some of these really deep policy positions, particularly in this moment in time?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, because I would say I was like, I have a lot of rage, like we all do, but I think I was more angry when I was on the outside than I am now. And it may be because I started meditating last August and I feel like that's helped. But I've had a really interesting experience. I would say like I wield my positivity very strategically. And I use it to connect with people who I don't agree with and try to see the humanity in them, even though we disagree. And so like, here's an example. I have a bill around U visa certification. So for victims of serious crimes, they can get law enforcement to verify that they helped in the identification and investigation and prosecution of that crime, and it can lead to a green card. But I'm getting a little bit off track, but anyway, I have a bill around that would create greater transparency and consistency. And I had a hearing on it, and one of the Republican legislators was asking questions that were off base, but I could tell that he wanted to learn. And so I reached out afterwards and I was like, do you want to just schedule a time to just talk about immigration and I can answer your questions? And so we scheduled a time to talk, and it was like he had never met an immigrant before, I think. But he asked like real questions without feeling like embarrassed or like he needed to be cagey. And I was able to share with him my experience as an immigration attorney and some like data. I like data. And he's kind of a wonky, nerdy guy too. But it's interesting, like that experience of like having this really open conversation. I think it helped open his mind. Here in, we're talking about driver's license for all. I think that he has a more open mind on that issue. And then also like when we have been having, I'm on the public safety committee, and those committee hearings are awful. They're raw and they're hard, and people are saying things that are painful. But I feel like having had that conversation with him once, like months ago, helps me to feel less angry and more productive in how I engage with the opposition. I've had like a very interesting experience. Like I almost think like I'm too positive, maybe like too, I don't know. I just feel like I get along really well with the other side. And I ultimately, like to me, that like I will wield it as a strategy. And I feel like it has helped me. For example, my U visa bill, like it's gotten nowhere. Like it's been around since 2016. This year I got it passed out of the Judiciary Committee with 100% bipartisan support. And I got the endorsement of the Minnesota Sheriff's Association. And I actually think it might pass into law. And it'll be because I took this approach that was very strategic and very canny. And I, afterwards I'm going to like be like, yay, it's about immigrants. But right now I'm just like, it's about helping law enforcement. But I think like that dynamic of being able to communicate with people who I disagree with vehemently is helpful. Like last night, this guy, sorry, I'm just going on tangent, but this like very hardcore Republican guy on the House floor where I was for like 12 hours yesterday, he just said things I disagree with vehemently, like from the bottom of my heart, like for 12 hours straight. But he like came over to offer me a cookie and we like bonded over Oscar Wilde being great. So it's interesting. I think it's important like to try to see the humanity and then be able to like feel comfortable in your disagreement and stand by your values. Because like Johana said, like if we lose because of it, that's okay, because that's why we're here. And I think that's important to remember too.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more, but we have a couple hands up. Sean had his hand up first. Would you like to respond or add something to the convo?
Definitely. So the conversation around coalitions for policies, for campaigning, one thing we don't talk about, but is an added benefit of RCV, is the fact that you're building coalitions, and that allows for upward mobility in seeking elected office. In San Francisco, we've seen folks like London Breed and Malia Cohen be able to build coalitions in a city where the Black population is probably closer to 3% today. They've been able to build coalitions with other ethnic groups, with labor, with women's groups, that have allowed them to go from being a member of the Board of Supervisors, in London's case, to mayor, the first Black woman to be mayor of San Francisco. In Malia's case, to go from being a member of the Board of Supervisors in a race that has 26 candidates, to go from winning that race to being elected president of the Board of Supervisors, to now being the chair of the State Board of Equalization, which is our tax board. And so she represents a fifth of the state of California and is one of the highest ranking Black women in the state, number 3, since we now have a vice president. But yes, so that upward mobility of building those coalitions that get you elected to local office, but also allow you to be that bridge, really is another added benefit of ranked choice voting, if you do it well.
I love that. Thank you for adding that in. Johana.
Yeah, just Representative Feist just made me think of right now I'm sort of facing honestly like a messaging dilemma, and I feel like this is helpful because I'm going to bring it back to values, which is I think what she was doing when she was talking to that representative, right, about that bill. The defund the police narrative has gotten me nowhere. And I've been trying to really be sober, like a sober read on how much power I have, right? And so right now we're in a budget discussion, right? And which I love budgets. I think budgets are super sexy. I'm trying to make other people think that as well. But I'm like, how do I get to the same outcome, perhaps with a different message that isn't just alienating me? And right now, the biggest issue that my colleagues and I have said, the biggest challenge, the biggest issue facing Las Cruces is housing instability. We are facing a huge housing crisis. So when I am presented with a budget, with a pie chart that has the biggest chunk of the pie for LCPD, my reflection is, how does this budget reflect the biggest challenges facing our city? And so I'm going to try to really reframe it again in the sense of values, in the sense of priorities. How are we talking about taking care of the most vulnerable people in our community? And honestly, part of me feels like I'm betraying a little bit of my organizer heart in that. At the end of the day, though, I'm trying to get to the same place, perhaps just taking a different road. And so I think if that's helpful in your election, during your campaigns, I highly recommend that you're talking to a wide range of folks and coalition members to try to really build that message that feels still genuine and powerful.
I love those additions. I got the chance to go to Atlanta, Georgia for the month of December to help out in the special election. And one of the things Stacey Abrams shared with me was that I asked her, I said, when we win this, should we just ram everything down their throats and just, govern in a way that, frankly, we've seen on the other side for years? And she said, well, Ron, when you have power, you have more than a responsibility just to do the right thing. And that really resonated, that like, even though you're speaking to a wide audience and even though we're passionate about the issues that we believe in, doing the right thing comes first, beyond our rhetoric or beyond our self-interest, right? Really for the interest of those that we're centering, right? The most vulnerable and marginalized among us. So thank you for that. Thank you for that, Sean. Got time for one question, and this is one that I'm really, really interested in. So I'm taking moderator's privilege to ask it. Would love to hear about the transition from campaigning to now governing and leadership, right? We know that part of our work is getting a lot more people involved and getting them to run. And we know that campaigning is what do they call it? Campaigning is poetry and governing is prose, right? So we'd love to hear about your experiences in that transition. And Johana, we'll start with you.
Oh man, I've been saying this to Emerge for a while now because there are great training programs across this country to train people like us to run for office, to train women of color. There are not great organizations that will support you once you're elected. Like, that is very much a gap that I am seeing, or at least I have not been connected to it. Local Progress is someone I recently connected with. And I'm excited about that. But I will say that's been one of the most challenging things. I'm also, I took the seat of, I don't know, like a 70-year-old white man. He was our city council representative before me. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit. I don't get to be retired and hold this seat that pays a part-time salary. And that has been, I think, a huge shift also for staff at City Hall. People aren't used to having folks who are both elected official and have another full-time job. Like, that's definitely been a little bit of an interesting shift. But I'm also like, honestly, yes, I'm usually exhausted, but I'm also trying to be really intentional about how I set boundaries and how I take care of myself. Because at the end of the day, I keep thinking spaces like this were not meant for people like me. So they will absolutely not run me out of here. I am going to stay, and I'm going to push that line as far as I can so that I am absolutely not the last one. And so I very much carry that purposefully. And I feel like, if I'm busy with a bunch of billion things, at the end of the day, am I answering constituent emails? Am I getting back, am I answering phone calls? Am I getting back to people with the concerns about their pothole, their, whatever it is? To me, that's the most important thing. And I've also I've really much positioned myself in committees that feel like that give me joy, right? And so I also just feel like that's a really important thing to do to make this. I love being on city council. I really do. I love local politics. I really feel like that's, I don't know, there's something about local politics that really are different than big national ones. And so some hard stuff, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes it gets a little lonely. But most of the time, when in doubt, you just reach out to the folks who keep you grounded.
Thank you for that answer. We'll go to Sean, and then we'll give Representative Feist the last word on that question.
So I think I come from it not from a governing angle, but from a guy who runs campaigns, that your re-election campaign starts the day you're sworn in. So I think you have to keep that coalition that you build to win engaged. So whether that's including them in participatory budgeting, even if your city doesn't offer that, still doing it personally in your outreach to your constituents, in building those bridges to accomplish legislation, like the senator said. It really is, people are looking at you constantly. And so living out those values, and again, that's why I tell folks to go from a place of values, because once you get elected, your position on issues, once you have more insider knowledge, may change. How you approach issues may change, but your values remain the same. And so if you're talking to folks from a place of values, you never break that bond because they know what's at your core. If you go from a place of this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to do, that may not be a reality once you're in office. And so speaking to folks and them knowing your heart is key. But I would say just keep them involved, keep them engaged. Don't become an elected official and then just get siloed. You have to remain engaged with the folks that got you into office, and expand that base. Don't just keep it to that coalition that got you elected. As you're working on issues, you're going to meet new organizations, you're going to meet new communities, bring them into the fold. Some of the best work I've seen done is where people have created nonprofits based off of their campaigns. And so they've transitioned that coalition into an organizing body that can then support them in their legislative priorities, that can push other council members or other elected officials to come on board and do the same. So whether that's, faith coalitions, whether that's community organizing coalitions, if it's neighborhood associations, whatever it is, kind of building an umbrella organization for them to continue to mobilize and organize under.
Man, y'all are dropping some nuggets. All right, we'll give Representative Feist the last word on this, transitioning from campaigning into governing.
What's really interesting to me is that the skills that make you a good campaigner are totally different skills than what make you a good political leader. And I think it's the fortunate few of us, or I mean, it's a good chunk of us that have both of those skill sets. So the speaking broadly and being on panels and speaking publicly, that's the campaigner. But then I love the nerdy technical aspect of drafting laws and negotiating, all of the unsexy technical part of actually making good policy really appeals to me. And so, but it is totally different skill set. I would say on what Sean was saying, I was thinking about how like one of the things I mentioned with my campaign that I did was just be helpful, like show up and be there. And I really continue to do that as an elected official. So for example, I'm on this group of New Brighton moms on Facebook, and mostly we just talk about mom stuff. But like people were really upset because we've had some disparities in the nutritional services and the meals that kids who are distance learning are getting versus the kids who are in person. And it started out just as a conversation on Facebook, but I reached out to our superintendent. They put me in touch with the nutritional services department, and we're trying to find out what the issue is so that the community can be informed. Another example is Columbia Heights is turning 100 this year. Yay. And I did a proclamation and I got it all signed, and just, you know, worked with the mayor of Columbia Heights and this communications guy to get that done. So just there are all these like ways that we can be, you know, really interacting with people in a real way and helping people in a really meaningful way. So yeah, and I guess one other thing that I was just thinking about was when I first got elected, I have this inbox that was already full of really angry emails, like before I ever got the inbox. And I will say, like, I have not had this much contact with people who disagree with me, like in my whole life. Even though like we're a super Democratic district, I won by over 70%, but the people who are angry and who disagree, like they're very vocal. And at first I like had this adjustment period where I was like, oh, I like thought everybody agreed with me. And then I felt kind of timid. And I was like, oh, well, I really want to sign on to like all of the Planned Parenthood bills, but should I? And then like I got to this point where I was like Johana was saying, like, we're here to do this. We're here to like speak our values and represent the people who elected us and voted for us. I mean, we represent our whole community, but we need to not shy away from that. And so I got like 6,000 emails from people not in my district who hated the comprehensive sex education bill. But I got like 3 emails from people in our district who said they love it. And I was like, I'm putting my name on that one. But just like feeling like you can be bold. But then like, I really do try very hard to engage with people who disagree with me to show that I'm listening. And also like, I don't know that I'm going to change any minds, but especially on immigration, when people email me about an immigration issue, I share my real thoughts. And sometimes those are difficult conversations, but I feel like it's my obligation, like as their representative, to hear them out and to engage. And I find that to be a joy, like to the constituent communication is a lot, but it's also, I think, maybe the most important thing, because we're trying to give people faith in democracy and that their elected leaders are real and they're listening and they're responding. And so maybe that's the most important thing that I do in my role. I'll leave it at that.
Wow. Thank you 3 for that. And thank you for indulging my question that I was holding on to for a while. Just want to thank the panelists for joining us today for this amazing and powerful discussion. I mean, what we heard today was, you know, ranked choice voting, if we do it the right way, allows us to build a bench of not only current leaders, but future leaders, that it injects positive campaigning and messaging into the political cycle. There's more access points for people to engage in our politics. There's more choice and more power as it relates to shaping our future. It affords us to help, center our humanity and center the people most closest to the pain. It allows us the opportunities to connect to voters on issues that are outside of politics, like romance novels and things like that. One thing that I love to share with candidates and campaigns that I get the chance to coach is that election day is just the starting line, not the finish line. Right, that when we talk about election day, we're really talking about election season, and that's a launch pad into what we're really trying to do, which is lead with our values and make a tangible difference in people's lives. So I'll leave you with this. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for the work that you're doing. You all, to use Johana's words, are what hope looks like to so many people. And don't shy away from that. Don't alleviate yourself from that responsibility, because there are a hell of a lot of people out here looking for some hope. And if you run your campaigns or conduct your leadership in the way that we've learned throughout this panel, there's a lot of people that are going to benefit from your leadership as well. So really appreciate you. Thanks for having me. And I will shift it back to Jeannie.